Welcome to Gyandoot 2.0 program, an initiative of the Commissionerate College Education Rajasthan. Friends, today we are going to discuss an important essay, The Spectator Club by Richard Steele. I am Bharti Singh Arya, Assistant Professor in the Department of English. Sir Richard Steele was born in Dublin, Ireland in 1672. He was the grandson of Sir William Steele, the Lord Chancellor of Ireland. His father died when he was 4 years old, and 1 year later his mother also died. He was born and brought up by his uncle and aunt. He became a Whig member of Parliament in 1713 for Stockbridge. He also co-founded the magazine The Spectator along with his friend Joseph Addison. He became the member of the Kit Kat Club. The Kit Kat Club was an early 18th century English club in London, which had strong political and literary associations. The members of the Kit Kat Club were committed Whigs. Steele wrote and directed the sentimental comedy, The Conscious Lovers. His first published work was The Christian Hero, that was published in 1701. In that, he attempted to point out the difference between perceived and actual masculinity, written when he was serving in the army. It expressed his idea of a pamphlet of moral instruction. The Christian Hero was ultimately ridiculed by people because they thought that it was a work of hypocrisy, as Steele did not follow his own preachings. He was artificial, and he was highly criticized for publishing a booklet about morals when he himself enjoyed drinking, occasional dueling, and debauchery around the town. He wrote the comedy The Funeral and also wrote prologue to The Mistake by John Vanbrugh, who was an important member of the Kit Kat Club along with Addison and Steele. His publications include The Tatler, which was Steele's first journal, and it came out in April 12, 1709. It appeared 3 times a week, on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Steele wrote this periodical under the pseudonym Isaac Bickerstaff. In The Tatler, he gave Bickerstaff an entirely fully developed personality. In the words of Steele, the motive of The Tatler was to expose the false arts of life, to pull off the disguises of cunning vanity and affectation, and to recommend a general simplicity in our dress, our discourse, and our behavior. Steele founded the magazine, although he and Addison collaborated in it. The majority of the essays were written by Steele. He wrote roughly 188 of the total 271 of the essays. Addison contributed 42 in it, and the rest of the 36 represented the pair's collaborative works. Whilst Addison contributed to the Tatler, we see that it is widely regarded as Steele's work. The Spectator. The Spectator was a daily publication founded by Joseph Addison and Richard Steele in England. It was published every day except Sundays. Now, it began from 1st March 1711 and continued till 6th December 1712, which had the total publications of 635 issues. Each paper or number was approximately 2,500 words long, and the original run had 555 issues. These were collected into 7 volumes. The paper was later revived in 1714 by Joseph Addison without Steele. Addison contributed 79 issues into it. Since Addison had taken the lead and written large number of essays than Steele, so he set the tone for the new journal. The Spectator focused on political, philosophical, religious, and literary issues. The Spectator adopted a fictional method of presentation through a spectator club, whose imaginary members extolled the author's own ideas about society. These members included representatives of commerce, the army, the town respectively, Sir Andrew Freeport, Captain Sentry, and Will Honeycomb. Of the country gentry was Sir Roger de Coverley. The paper was ostensibly written by Mr. Spectator, an observer of the London scene. In the Spectator Club, there are 6 members: Sir Roger de Coverley, student of law, Sir Andrew Freeport, Captain Sentry, Will Honeycomb, and the clergyman. Steele talks about the first gentleman of his company, a baronet, whose name is Sir Roger de Coverley, a gentleman of Worcestershire. The people who knew about the county of Sir Roger knew Sir Roger also. Sir Roger was a man of extraordinary nature and had a good sense. He always found fault with the ways of the world, but this unusual nature never made him any enemies, as he does nothing with sourness or obstinacy. He had a unique capacity to please others. Sir Roger was a bachelor because he was disappointed in love of a beautiful widow. He was serious for 1.5 years. Before this disappointment, Sir Roger was a normal, happy young man, a fine gentleman. He moved in society of important persons like Lord Rochester and Sir George Etheridge. However, after being ill-used by the widow, he lost all his joviality and interest in social life for more than a year. He became very serious. Gradually, his joviality returned. However, he grew careless about his dress. He wore a coat and a jacket of a cut, which was in fashion at that time. Now Sir Roger was 56 years old, but was quite hale and hearty, a great lover of mankind. He had a house in village and a town. He had such good nature that people loved him. He also treated his servants well. His tenants grew rich. His servants looked satisfied. All the young women professed love to him, and the young men were glad of his company. He was also the justice of the quorum and showed his judicial abilities on the chair of justice at a quarter session. He is aware of the new rules passed in the government, like the Game Act, which prohibited the killing of birds. The second character is the student of law. Steele has described his another companion of the club. He is a lawyer and a member of the Inner Temple. He was also a bachelor. He was a man of sharp wit and clear understanding. He chose his occupation rather to obey direction of his old father than to incline to his own tendencies. He took to the study of law in obedience to his father, rather than pursuit of his own nature. He was more interested in the study of drama and dramatic criticism. The philosophers like Aristotle and Longinus were well understood by him than Litterton or Coke. His father used to send to him various questions on law in order to ensure his son's progress in legal studies. The son outwitted the father by getting them answered through a lawyer whom he had engaged for the purpose. Nobody took him as a fool, but only his friends knew that he had a great wit. He liked to read books which were not of the age he lived. He has read all the books but approves of very few. He was familiar with the writings, customs, actions, and manners of ancient writers, which made him a keen observer of the worldly affairs. He was an excellent critic. His real hour of business was the time of the play. The presence of an able critic among the audience would rouse the actors to give the best performance possible. He represents those in the upper class who do not understand matters of law or economies but are still well-read intellectuals. Next, the author has discussed about Sir Andrew Freeport, who was a good businessman of great eminence in the city of London. He was very laborious, experienced, and had a great understanding. His knowledge of commerce was extensive. He had his own ideals of the ways of enlarging a country's trade. He was of the opinion that a dominion may be extended by art and industry than by power. Diligence or industry alone would help the country to gain things of permanent value, and sloth or idleness more than the sword. It only caused the ruin of many nations. He knew many short maxims, and his favorite one was, "A penny saved is a penny got." He had a unique art of speech. He was a self-made person and believed that England too could become richer than other kingdoms by methods which had so benefited him. Overall, he represents those in the upper class who felt that England's power should come through industry and not arms. After Sir Andrew, Steele has described the merits of Captain Sentry. He was very courageous, intelligent, and had good understanding. He was such a man who had not received good consideration of his abilities. He had been captain in military for some years and fought bravely on fronts. He left the army because even though he rendered meritorious service, which anyone could see and appreciate, promotion did not come to him. He used to say that only that man could hold a position in military who gets over his false modesty. According to him, strict honesty and regular behavior are nothing but obstacles in themselves. He was of the opinion that it is cowardice to stand back modestly. Similarly, a man who failed to assert himself and demand what was his due was a coward. He was frank in speaking about the weaknesses of his officers. This frankness was a part of his character. The military part of his life has furnished him with many adventures in relation to which he is very agreeable to the company. Though he commanded many persons in military, he was never haughty. He was not even overbearing. He never became a flatterer, although he obeyed his superiors. He represents the idealized upper class military man whose bravery and commitment to his duty have made him success and strong. Next, the author talks about Will Honeycomb, the fifth member of the club. Though Will Honeycomb was old, there were no traces of the passage of time in his brain or in his person. He was a socialite who has always had easy access to money. He had an attractive personality with a good height and could impress women by his talk. He dressed well and was well acquainted with the history of every fashion that remained in vogue in England. He had a pleasing demeanor, with a smiling face, and laughed easily. Will Honeycomb was always interested in matters pertaining to women. In his conventions, while in his conversations he talked mostly of women, their dresses, their manners, and their fashions. He had a good knowledge of history. He could tell that the hairstyles or hats of our wives and daughters resembled to those of the wenches of French kings. The writer calls him a well-bred, fine gentleman. Leaving the relations of women, he was an honest and worthy man. Honeycomb represents those in the upper class who were not concerned with serious business matters like Freeport, but rather focused on their social lives. At the end of the essay, the author tells us about one of his companions who seldom visits because of his poor health. But when he does, he is an enjoyable company. He is the clergyman, a philosopher in nature. He lived a sacred life and was very weak in constitution. Because of ill health, he could not fulfill the responsibilities which promotion in the church might have brought him. He spoke on divine topics with authority. He has a lot of followers and possess a positive attitude towards life. He wished for the good of world even after his death. This representation depicts English clergymen as intellectual, caring people. So, Steele concludes the essay by calling them his ordinary companions of the club. Thank you.